What up, everyone? Welcome to a Thirsty Thursday edition of The Sweat presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Latzia. Pull this microphone in here. And we're stuffing all the DFS and betting knowledge inside the next 55 minutes. We will go around the diamond, like which team should trade for Deebo Samuel and really how to approach the NFL draft on the DK Sportsbook, plus an 11-game NHL slate to break down. But first, oh man, we had that drama mama in the NBA last night. So Joel Embiid sinks Toronto with his game-winning 3 in overtime. No team has ever lost a series after building a 3-0 lead. The Celtics rally from 17 points down to knock off the Nets with KD and Kyrie just going absolutely cold in the second half. Then there was DeMar DeRozan delivering the highest scoring playoff performance of his career, helping the Bulls steal game 2 in Milwaukee and evening the series against the Bucks. 3 more games on the slate tonight and 3 dudes here to talk about it. DraftKings contributors Matt Meiselman, Gary and Thorne, DK Nation's Chinmay Vaidya. Gary, and I'll start with you. Who's your go-to top price DFS player tonight? Talk to me, Goose.
Yeah, I think with the status of Luka Doncic still kind of up in the air, for me, it's pretty obviously Ja Morant. I think you have to look at this as a situation where just with this game being in Minnesota, maybe it can stay relatively competitive. I know that was kind of an issue for a lot of Timberwolves games this season. They either won by 20 or lost by 20. But Morant has been able to put up some massive numbers despite really not playing what we would consider playoff minutes. But he's averaging 1.54 DraftKings points per minute in the first 2 games of this series. His usage rate is up over 33%. And coming as a surprise to no one, this is by far the fastest paced series we've had of the first round. They're averaging 104.3 possessions per 48 minutes, which is 3 full possessions more than any other series. So I think you have to really exploit this game. And I think Morant, on the off chance that he is forced into a situation where he has to play 36 to 40 minutes, in that particular set of circumstances, he could be looking at like 65 or 70 DraftKings points.
Okay, Chinmay, what do you want to do here?
I like Morant. He's a good play, and I think he's going to have a good game. But I think you have to go with Nikola Jokic, the big man for the Denver Nuggets. He has been absolutely on fire, despite Denver really struggling. And even though those games haven't been that close, Jokic is averaging 25.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 1.5 blocks. And he's basically filling up every stat category that you want. I think that's money well spent. If you're going to pay up for somebody, you got to pay up for Denver's big man, who enters tonight's game 3 in a massive spot for his team. He really needs that game. Denver really needs that game. I think Jokic has a big one tonight.
Okay, yeah, most expensive player on the slate there, Matty. How much money are you planning to spend here? You're going to go all the way to the top like Chinmay?
Well, it's tough having the 3rd pick in the DFS draft. These guys took my first 2 favorite players on the slate. So I'll just go to my 3rd favorite. And it's actually, I'm stretching the rules here on paying up, but Rudy Gobert at 7,600, I think qualifies as a bit of a pay up option. And I think for tournaments tonight, what's going to happen is Jokic is sort of a can't miss. And then Karl Anthony Towns is way underpriced. So if you're playing cash games, I think Towns makes sense. But because Gobert is a center, just like these other guys, he almost has to go overlooked. And we haven't seen Gobert have a good offensive game yet in this series. He's scored below 10 points in both of them. Generally, Rudy Gobert is a double-double machine, and the double-double bonus is a pretty big boost to his fantasy production. So the rebounds are going to be there. He's playing big minutes. He's going to block some shots. And I think at lower ownership than the other centers, if we get 15 real points out of him, it could be a pretty massive fantasy game. So I think Gobert is a contrarian pivot off of these other centers. This is the pick I made a couple of days ago. I'm just going right back to the well. I like Rudy for tonight.
All right, so Chinmay, like you're spending a boatload of money tonight on the highest priced player on this 3-game slate. So what's your favorite value play tonight?
There are a couple of good ones in the Grizzlies game. Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks are both in that 6K range. That could be decent options, but I actually like Brandon Clark. He's under 5K, listed at 4,700 right now. 13 points, 7.5 rebounds in the last 2 games as his average, 25 minutes a game. And the Grizzlies have learned that Steven Adams basically cannot take the floor for extended minutes against Karl Anthony Towns. So Jenkins, the head coach there, has learned that Adams is not going to be an option, which means that Brandon Clark is due for extended minutes once again. So I like him as the value play under 5K. But if you do have the money to spend up, Bain and Brooks are probably going to deliver more upside as starters who get heavy minutes for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, Clark has surpassed the season average in minutes too in both games of this series. Maddie, what do you want to do in the value department?
I'm glad Chinmay brought this situation up because this is where I'm looking too. And unfortunately, I thought Steven Adams was a good play last game. Certainly can't go back there. Maybe I'm stretching the rules again a little bit, but Jaren Jackson at 6,300, I think he's sort of a value play. I don't think his fantasy projections are going to look all that good, but Clark makes sense. He's cheaper, and I think a lot of people will play him. I think a decent amount of the field will play Xavier Tillman, who stepped up when Adams went out last game. Jaren Jackson has a ton of upside as a fantasy player. He just always gets in foul trouble. And for tournaments, if you can just get a game where he doesn't get in foul trouble, we're seeing that Adams is getting run off the court in this series. So there could be parts of the game where Jackson's actually playing center, and the fouls are going to be a concern. Like if you roster him, don't watch because he's probably going to pick up fouls. It's going to be very frustrating. But I think that there's a lot of upside for that $6,300 price tag, and I don't think too many people are going to play him.
Yeah, and Jackson can put up monster numbers too, Matt, on the defensive end, like when he blocked 7 shots in game 1. Gary, and who do you want as your value play tonight? You got a top guy?
Yeah, I think we've all kind of identified the exact same positional group in the same game. I think both coaches have as well, as these guys were talking about. I mean, this isn't really a series where Steven Adams or Naz Reid have been all that involved, at least on a consistent basis. So I think you start looking at guys that they've already mentioned, and even someone like Jaden McDaniels, who is $3,600. He's played over 20 minutes in both of the first 2 games of this series. And really, we saw the highs and the lows with McDaniels. He had 34 DraftKings points in game 1, then 9 DraftKings points in game 2. But that really just came down to shooting variance. I mean, I think more than likely the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And if you're looking at 20 to 25 DraftKings points for someone who is just $3,600, again, playing in by far the best environment on this slate, I think that's a pretty good direction to go. If you do want someone who's playing in a different game, I think like Gary Payton, the third, pretty locked into like 20 minutes is less than $3,500. Even like Nemanja Bjelica also seems like he's locked into about 20 minutes for the Warriors. So there are other places to go, but I do think spamming this particular Minnesota game is probably the best course of action.
All right, well, Maddie, let's go over to the DK Sportsbook here. What's your favorite player prop on the DK Sportsbook tonight?
So this will probably be a pretty boring one if you choose to go with this and watch it, but D'Angelo Russell's assist line just seems too high to me. And I think partly what happened here is that at the end of the regular season, Patrick Beverley missed a couple games and Russell had a few big assist totals in Beverley's absence. He put up 11 assists and 9 assists, and I think it was the last 2 games of the regular season, at least the ones that he played in. So 6.5 assists, the unders plus 110. I don't think Russell gets to 7 assists in half of his games. I actually think it's more likely than not he comes in under that, and you're getting plus money on it. So it's never fun to root for unders, I guess, unless you're me. But for most people, it's not that fun to root for unders on player props. I just think this number's too high. We probably see it come down throughout the day. All
right, Chinmay, what about you, dude?
I'm going the other way on this for Matt. I'm going to root for an over plus money prop. I like Royce O'Neal over 1.5 3-pointers at plus 115. He hit 4 in the last game, and the Jazz need some of their peripheral players to step up. O'Neal's home shooting splits this season are a bit concerning, so I can understand why people will look at that and say, okay, this guy is probably not going to get to this total, but he only needs 2 threes, and he's pretty much good for 1 in most of his games. He hit 4 in the last game. He's shooting well at the moment. I think the Jazz need to get some of their other guys involved. So I like Royce O'Neal over 1.5 3-pointers plus 115. That's the one that I'm going with tonight.
Gary, what's your favorite player prop tonight?
I was worried when Matt was talking about a boring one because this feels like excuse me. This feels like when he took Isaiah Stewart over half a 3-pointer towards the end of the regular season, but a little more accomplished 3-point shooter, but the exact same line. I'm going to go with Draymond Green over half a 3-pointer in tonight's game. It is plus money at plus 105. Teams just change the way they guard Draymond in the playoffs. You can be far more experimental and far more, really risk averse in the playoffs, just letting Draymond shoot, letting him try that backpack jumper all he wants. And it bears out in the numbers. For his career during the regular season, he averages 2.6 3-point attempts per game. In the playoffs, that number jumps to 3.7. He's already attempted 5 in this series. He's made 1 in each of the first 2 games. I just think he's going to take like 3 threes tonight. They're going to be absolutely wide open, and he probably makes 1. And I think it's enough for me at plus 105 to watch Draymond shoot and just pray 1 goes in.
All right, Chinmay, bring us home with that slate approved pick. Favorite bet on the board is what and why?
I do like the Timberwolves money line at home. It's plus 105 right now. It'll probably drop a little bit. The Timberwolves 26-15 at home in the regular season. They've been competitive against the Grizzlies, and I know that blowout game in game 2 will turn some people off, but this team is so much better at home than they are on the road. And I think they get the job done tonight against the Grizzlies. Give me Minnesota at home as the money line underdog.
Maddie, what do you want?
I actually like both home underdogs tonight, but the game that's more important to me than both of those is the Utah Jazz. And I'm pretty sure Luka Doncic is not playing. Like, that's really the big thing for the Jazz Mavericks game. Just based on all of the reports that came out yesterday, I think all indications are that Doncic actually plays game 4, not game 3. They're calling him questionable, and they're talking about his risk of re-injury, which I don't think has much to do with how he feels. I think they're more concerned with, let's keep him healthy to try to make a deeper run in the playoffs. And because the Mavericks, and this is like the main factor for me, because the Mavericks won game 2, they can afford to lose game 3, or at least try to play it without him. So this is not a must-win game. I think they have to get a split in Utah, but they don't necessarily have to win tonight. So I think Doncic sits out 1 more game, and in that scenario, Jazz minus 6.5, that's just way too low of a line. I think we see it get up to like minus 10 once he's finally ruled out.
Gary, what's your favorite bet on the board tonight?
I'm going to take the Mavs points. I agree with Matt. I think we're probably looking at like a 40-60 scenario here with Luka tonight. But at the same time, I mean, questionable in the playoffs just doesn't generally mean the same thing as questionable in the regular season. I think doubtful is kind of questionable in the playoffs if you look at history. And maybe this is special circumstance. Obviously, we're in a weird situation where, like Matt mentioned, this is more about risk of re-injury. And Luka even saying yesterday, he doesn't want to kind of play like Steph Curry. He doesn't want 6-minute spurts. He wants to be able to play like he normally plays in a game. And maybe that does limit him in this contest. But I look at a Jazz team that, I mean, they went 6-18-2 against the spread when they had to play a team above 500. And maybe the Mavericks aren't above 500 without Luka Doncic, but I just don't really trust the Jazz right now. So even if this turns out that Luka doesn't play, and Matt's right, this probably gets to something like 9.5 or 10, I'm still comfortable taking the Mavs plus 6.5.
All right, guys. Love you. Hopefully we get a few more NBA games tonight with some thrilling finishes like last night. We love the drama. We're going to turn our attention to the NHL next, right after we continue our series about NFL teams' needs ahead of the NFL draft, which is exactly 1 week from today. Pierce Dietrich breaking down the Division of America's team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the AFC South.
Hi, Pierce Dietrich here with DraftKings, bringing you the draft needs for each team in the AFC South. The Indianapolis Colts, 9-8 in 2021. They do not have a first-round pick. Their first pick is number 42 overall, but they don't have many draft needs. They could use a wide receiver to take pressure off of Michael Pittman and to give Matt Ryan another weapon. They could also use some help on the offensive line. The Colts chose to let left tackle Eric Fisher go to free agency. He was a good run blocker, but not the greatest pass blocker. They also need an edge rusher, but this is a deep class, and there's a possibility that they could get an impactful edge rusher with their 42nd pick overall. Tennessee Titans, 12-5 last season. The Titans have a need at offensive line, especially in pass protection. Speaking of the pass, they could also use a quarterback. They could draft Tannehill's immediate replacement or his understudy, but they do not have a second-round pick. So the 26th pick overall will either be a lineman or a quarterback. In the third round, the Titans will need to address their cornerback issues and add some depth in their secondary. Jacksonville Jaguars, 3-14. The DraftKings Sportsbook believes that Michigan edge Aiden Hutchinson will go to the Jags number 1 overall. The Jaguars have addressed their offensive line needs in free agency, but they still have a ways to go. Look for the Jags to take a lineman in round 2. They also have linebacker needs. Look in day 2 for Christian Harris or Quay Walker to go to the Jacksonville Jaguars at linebacker. Houston Texans 4-13. Where do we begin? How much time do I have? That's not enough time. Let's start with safety. PFF ranked this secondary as the worst in football last season. Edge pass rushers. The Texans recorded the 5th fewest sacks last season. Offensive line. PFF ranked this as the worst offensive line. The ESPN advanced stats back that up as well. Long story short, they have needs everywhere.
All right, guys and gals, we have 11 games on tonight's NHL slate. We got to get right to it. Let's break down the DFS side of this thing with three of my favorite hockey heads. They love sticky puck just as much as you and I. RotoWire's Paul Bruno and AJ Scholes. We got Pete Jensen here of NHL.com's Fantasy on Ice podcast. Who are you paying up for tonight at center, Paul? It looks like, I know Matthews, $9,200, day to day, missed last game. We know that, but he did join the team on the road trip.
I think he's going to show up tonight. I think it's too much of a price to pay, though. Given the matchup, I'm going to fade him this evening. I'm going to say, look at three other guys who have much more favorable matchups, including Alex Barkhoff. He's carrying the Florida offense, which is on fire right now. He's got $8,300 price tag against the Detroit team that's minus Dylan Larkin. So I don't know who they're going to put up against him at center ice that can slow this guy down. He's got 19 points in his last 10 games played, averaging 18.3 DKs along the way. Sebastian Aho is doing the same thing in Carolina. He costs a little cheaper, $7,500 for a guy who's got 11 points and 26 shots on goal. He's also a regular scorer, and he's facing a Winnipeg Jets team that has just gotten eliminated. They will be a dispirited club. I think Carolina rolls them. And then St. Louis, one of the hottest teams in the league, pacing their attack behind Rob Thomas. He's $5,700, the cheapest of the big boys that I'm looking at. 19 points, averaging 15 plus DKs in the last 10 games. He gets a San Jose team that's in the bottom third of the league in goals against, so that adds up to a big night for him.
All right, AJ, are you looking for a center as more of a standalone player tonight, or one to kind of, pair or stack with a winger?
Yeah, I'm looking the stack option here, and I am going to use Barkhoff here. I mean, if you look at the DK Sportsbook, the Panthers are ridiculous favorites to win tonight against Detroit, and I think they have to be the starting point of building out any lineup here. So for that reason, I'll pay the $8,300 to get Alexander Barkhoff in my lineup. His goals per game rate this season is 0.59, and that's despite a recent 5-game drought, which he, dispatched in fantastic fashion with a hat trick on Tuesday. If you want to fade the Panthers, because they probably will be heavily owned, I would give Tage Thompson of the Sabres a look at 6,800 since they'll be facing the Devils in a winnable game. But for me, I'm not going to be fading the Panthers tonight. I think it could be a big blowout win for them.
So that would be what, AJ? Would that be their 12th one in a row?
Well, it would be 12 in a row it's got to be more than 12. It would be 12 in a row just for Bobrovsky.
Okay.
I think Spencer Knight picked up 2 in there as well. So
damn. Okay.
They're on an 11-game streak now, guys.
Okay.
So you know.
All right. No, it's good to know. Pete, it would also be good to know who you're going to pay up for tonight at center.
Yeah, totally echo what these guys are saying about Florida. They don't lose anymore right now these days. But
crazy.
I'm looking at Elias Lindholm. This Calgary Flames offense is ridiculous. They're playing Dallas, who got beat pretty bad yesterday. They'll be on the second of a back-to-back. So Elias Lindholm, still pretty moderately priced among the elite at $6,900. And yeah, with what he's doing this season, he's almost at the 40-goal, 40-assist mark. He's got 39 of each. He's top 15 in the NHL in even strength goals and points. And his line mate, Johnny Hockey, is definitely worth spending up for as well if you want to go the stacking route, because Johnny Gaudreau, not sure many people realize this, but he has by far and away the most even strength points in the entire NHL this year. I don't think he's getting enough MVP love, Johnny Hockey, but perennial underrated Elias Lindholm, I'd spend up for him.
Hey, Paul, I'll go right back to you here for winger, as in like which one needs to be in your lineup, because I'm assuming if you don't like Matthews' price, you're going to go with Marner there at $8,400, $500 clear of the next guy.
No, I'm going to fade him. I don't like the matchup. It's going to be a tight affair with with Florida tonight. I think whoever they get, one of the Florida teams is going to be tough anyway tonight and Thursday. Saturday rather than that game. Huberdeau is my pick in that game, though. $7,900 for a guy who's got 18 points and 33 shots on goal in his last 10. Nobody's stopping him or slowing him down. He looks to be a good play against that Detroit club. Patrick Kane is a point-scoring machine. Let's not forget about the non-playoff teams completely. He's got 90 points in 73 games on the year, and it's all about reaching the 100-point plateau for him. So I think he's going to continue the high shot rate. He's got 45 in the last 10 games played, and that's against the Los Angeles club that's in the hunt. So it could be an interesting game there. Vladimir Tarasenko of St. Louis has been a tank. That's his nickname, the Russian tank, actually, in St. Louis. 20 points in his last 10 games played, 32 shots on goal. He gets a great matchup against San Jose. And then finally, that Calgary top line, you can't overlook them when a guy like Matthew Tkachuk is priced at only $6,800, 16 points and 30 shots on goal, averaging 17-plus points in DK play over the last 10. A tough matchup against Dallas, will only fire this guy up, so I'm not scared about that one.
All right, Pete. I mean, you typically maybe want a guy who's going to take a bunch of shots on goal here at winger at a reduced price. I mean, Huberdeau's not exactly a reduced price, but 111 points, and he gets a lot of assists, especially secondary ones, dude.
Yeah, I'm finding a way to tap into Elias Pettersson, the center that has 39 points in his past 29 games. And the way to do that is Brock Besser, his line mate, just came back from injury a couple of days ago, has 5 points and 7 shots in his past 2 games. And again, Brock Besser has had an underwhelming season at large, but the Vancouver Canucks are in the midst of a playoff push. They're really still in this thing, and they're playing the Minnesota Wild, who has great goaltending, but take that shutout away that Talbot had in the most recent game, and they had allowed 10 goals in their prior 2 games prior to that. So they're not perfect. Minnesota's already clinched. So I think that it's going to be a situation where Vancouver needs it more. Pettersson will keep going as the hot hand, and Besser, again, has been exploding ever since coming back from injury. So I really like him. And he's pretty cheap, $4,500 for a player that I would normally expect would be like 55, 6,000 type thing.
Okay. AJ, I'm looking at like Cole Caulfield too, around that same neck of the woods, 4.7. What do you want?
Oh man, that's super tempting. I'll always use the Wisconsin Badger whenever I can, but I think you have to go up to the top here and use Barkhoff. As you said, Emerson, 111 points this year. That trails only Connor McDavid. For some reason, he's $500 cheaper than Mitch Marner. I'm not really sure why, when you consider he's got the best matchup on the slate tonight, and you know, like I said, he's got more points than Marner on the year. I would honestly recommend looking full stack across this entire line. Now, Carter Verhaeghe is going to sit out tonight with what they're calling a maintenance day. So the third man on that line is going to be Sam Reinhart, who comes in at a pretty modest 5,500. So you can relatively easily get all three of Barkhoff, Huberdeau, and Reinhart without having to go too heavy into the price range.
Okay. Pete, let's go back on the blue line. Who's your favorite defenseman tonight?
I like the matchup for Rasmus Dahlin, Buffalo Sabres. A lot of people out there may not know that he's reached the 50-point mark on the season, something a Sabres defenseman hasn't done since the mid-90s. So high praise there. I know they haven't had the best teams in recent years during their playoff drought, but still some good players have played for that franchise since the mid to late 90s. So I give Dahlin a lot of credit. Favorable matchup against the New Jersey Devils, and talk about what Dahlin did. 4 points in 2 games, the back-to-back set over the weekend against the Philadelphia Flyers. He's been great against the Metro Division this year, 19 points in 21 games. So I'd like having him in my lineup, because even though Buffalo's out of contention, they have Alex Tuch, they have Tage Thompson, who's at like 36 goals, and Jeff Skinner. Those guys pop off on the power play. Buffalo has one of the best power plays in the month of April.
All right, let's go, Paul. Hook me up.
I love the call on Rasmus Dahlin. I'm right there with you, Pete. All that you said is true. The Sabres are really building something. I think they're playing with a ton of confidence, and he's been driving a lot of that offense as the power play quarterback, so well worth the $5,400. I'm going to look at a couple of guys that don't get credit enough for what they do on the defensive side of the puck, too. You don't normally think about that with Justin Falk in St. Louis, but he's blocked 10 shots as well as getting 11 points in his last 10 games played, so that's worth over 13 DK points per game, and well worth the $5,300 if he reaches that average tonight. Jared Spurgeon playing against Vancouver, driving the Minnesota offense, which is on fire. He's got 8 points and 21 shots on goal, 20 blocks for a DK average of 12.3 points per game in his last 10.
AJ, who's your dude on the blue line?
Well, for me, I'm going to go with Justin Falk here. 5,300 is the price tag, so a little bit discounted compared to the top of the board. But for the month of April, he's actually got the second most points among blue liners here. The matchup is solid going up against San Jose, who's got a ton of guys sidelined due to injury right now. So I think it's a good opportunity to use the Blues tonight, starting with Justin Falk.
All right, guys, let's get you out of here with this. Best value play this evening. Who are you looking at, AJ?
Well, I got to throw some Penguin in here, right? So for me, I'm looking at Ricard Raquel, 4,600. He's getting that plum assignment to play with Crosby and Gensel on the Penguins' top line, including replacing the still suspended Evgeny Malkin on the number one power play. Look, it's a risky play for sure, considering he hasn't scored in 8 straight games, but he has 5 helpers over that stretch. And I think at under 5K, that's good value for this guy who's, again, going to play on a top line that really generates a ton of offense for the Penguins.
Paul, who do you want?
I'm going to give you 3 names to think about. Whoever plays Montreal has to be a consideration. So Kevin Hayes been playing very well of late, 8 points, 37 shots on goal, $4,800 the price tag on him. He's got a size advantage against some of the little guys that he'll be opposing at center ice. Braden Shen for St. Louis has a great matchup against San Jose. We've already panned that club in this episode, 12 points in his last 10 games played. So, and then I got to throw some love to the Maple Leafs. I'm not going to ignore them. They're playing Tampa tonight in a game where they can clinch second place. And Bunting for the Leafs has been on fire on the road. The guy's a road warrior, 42 points and 38 road games on the year, priced at only $4,200, despite the fact he has 3 goals and 12 points, along with 28 shots on goal. He's got a great matchup because he's got those line mates. I think Matthews is going to play tonight.
Pete, bring us home.
I like Philip Deneau. Not many people are talking about what a great signing this was for the LA Kings. Everybody was hating on it in the offseason. Now the Kings might make the playoffs, even if they are backing in. They got a favorable schedule down the stretch. That continues against the Chicago Blackhawks. 3 goals, 1 assist in 2 games for Deneau against the Hawks this season. And very quietly, Philip Deneau has already reached a career high in goals with 25. So, you know, hate him now. I think it was a great underrated signing that has helped the LA Kings progress beyond their years. And he's doing this as the number 2 center behind Kopitar. So I give him a lot of credit for the season he's having.
Hockey dudes, appreciate what you just did for us. You are free to go because we have some NFL draft bets to discuss with Pierce, Jeff, and Reed. But first, Julian Edlow deciding to show up to work and share with us what NFC East teams are jonesing for, what they need right now.
Julian Edlow here for DraftKings, and we are going to run through some 2022 NFL draft needs for the NFC East here. Let's start with the division champs, the Dallas Cowboys. They went 12-5 last season. They are going to be selecting number 24 overall in this draft. Cowboys obviously known for their offense, and they recently drafted CeeDee Lamb high in the draft. But let's remember, Amari Cooper gone, Cedric Wilson gone, and Michael Gallup injured his knee. So all of a sudden, the wide receiver position behind CeeDee Lamb becomes a position of need. So I think that the Dallas Cowboys at wide receiver could use some help there, and then some offensive line, protect Dak Prescott. So look at offense there for the Cowboys early, who also select at 56 and 88. The Philadelphia Eagles finished last season at 9-8. Plenty of draft capital here for the Philadelphia Eagles, who have used a first-round pick on a receiver 2 years in a row, but that is not to mean that they can't do it again, because I think wide receiver is a position that the Eagles will be looking at to add on top of Jalen Reagor and Devontae Smith, the former Heisman Trophy winner. And then obviously on the defensive side of the ball, the Eagles could use some help in that secondary as well as the linebacker core. So look for the Eagles to make a splash on both sides of the ball when they're selecting. The Washington Commanders finished 7-10 last season. They have the 11th overall pick, and they could also use some help all over the field. Wide receiver is going to be a position of need basically for everyone but the Giants in the NFC East. So that's somewhere that Washington could go. A lot of receivers in the top half of this first round to like. but Washington needs a ton of help. And on defense, somebody that they could look at is the safety from Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton, who was thought of to be a top 5 pick at one point in time and is now kind of sliding out of the top 10. So if he's there at number 11, that's a guy for Washington to look at. And then at the bottom, you got the New York Giants sitting at 4 and 13, but they're going to have a good chance to improve here with the 5th and 7th picks in the draft. So they're going to get some good players here. Daniel Jones, way too many sacks given up by the Giants. So I would be shocked if offensive line is not one of those 2 picks at 5 and 7. And then look for some help on defense. Cornerbacks, there's a couple of good ones that could go in the top 10 that I could see the Giants looking to get involved with.
All right, back here on an at-home edition of The Sweat. I'm Emerson Latzia. Another chapter was added to the wildest offseason in NFL history on Wednesday. 49ers all-pro receiver Deebo Samuel reportedly requesting a trade out of San Francisco. One of the league's most electric players apparently doesn't like the way the team is using him and the amount of hits that he's taking. So let's break it down with the boys, plus some sportsbook plays for the NFL draft. Now just 1 week away. DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich, Jeff Ulrich, Reed T. Fowler. Reed, we talked about it a little bit yesterday on a Wednesday edition of the slate with Jeff Ulrich. Which team needs to go after Deebo?
Well, all of them.
Yeah, every team could use them, right?
All 32 teams could use Deebo Samuel, including the San Francisco 49ers, who right now, the DK Sportsbook, are the favorites to have Deebo next year at minus 300. Now, we talked about a handful of teams. Jeff alluded to it like, not staying in the NFC, that it's got to go to the AFC, which I do believe. And look, if it's not the 49ers, I think the Jets make the most sense. They have the most draft capital, right? They have the most cap space to allow Deebo Samuel to be there. But the more I think about it, you're kind of, getting an older look. Deebo Samuel is a great player, but he's only played 1 full season, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of getting an older version of what they just drafted last year, which is Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, towards the end of last season, was that type of player. Like Deebo Samuel is a lot better than Elijah Moore, but remember what he was doing more on 60 to 70% of the snaps. And then once he got above that, he was amazing. So that's something that you need to think about. And look, if they do get Deebo Samuel, what it means for the draft is they're going cornerback, right, instead of wide receiver at that 10th position.
Okay, Pierce, what could the impact be on the draft here with a week to go and Deebo wanting out of San Francisco?
He's not going anywhere. If you trade for him right now, you're crazy. And this is littered with red flags. I mean, the guy, at first it was he scrubbed his social media. Oh my goodness. And then he wouldn't say why he wanted out. Well, that sounds like a real great player that you want to bring into your team. And now we find out that he's taking too many hits. It's football, dude. What are you doing? He doesn't like his role. They built the entire offense around you. Well, who would want to bring this guy onto your team? Oh, let's trade for Deebo. He doesn't like getting tackled, and he doesn't like getting the ball. Yeah, that sounds like a great move to bring him in right now. You might want to just wait a little bit. I mean, if you do bring him in, the price has got to be really low. There's no way San Francisco is going to get a high price out of this guy with that kind of baggage. They need to wait a little bit, wait for things to cool down, for the dust to settle, and then maybe you trade him. But then again, the guy just woke up one day and said, I want out. It's not a player that you really want on your team.
Yeah, Jeff, like when I saw that report early this morning that he didn't like the way he was being used and taking hits, I'm like, dude, that's what makes you is the way that you're being used.
Yes, that is true. And I just want to point out that this is basically Groundhog Day, because this is an exact replica of what Pierce said about Tyreek Hill. And what happened there? Tyreek Hill got traded 2 hours after Pierce said that. So goodbye, Deebo Samuel. He's getting traded today. That's pretty much that. He's done. You guys are obviously the guys are right. I mean, this is all just a show in the media. I'm not sure what Deebo's talking about getting hits. Maybe he just doesn't want to be used as a running back because he knows that'll shorten his career. It's actually smart. I do think that there are some teams, though, that specifically should be looking at Deebo Samuel. The first one it's the Philadelphia Eagles. They have the cap space. What have the Eagles been doing the last 2 drafts? They've been drafting wide receivers. Devontae Smith looks like a keeper. Jalen Reagor does not. Deebo Samuel can do all the things that Jalen Reagor can't do, which is, catch those quick screen passes, actually break tackles, maybe even go downfield and catch a long ball. He's the perfect fit for this Philadelphia Eagles offense. And guess what? Eagles have 2 first-round draft picks. I think that is the ideal landing spot for Deebo Samuel. And it's ideal because I think that he'll have success right off the bat in that offense with Jalen Hurts. So That's the one team I really have my eye on. I'm hoping that's what happens if he does end up traded, but sayonara, because Pierce has already given him the kiss of death.
So you don't believe in JJ Arcega-Whiteside anymore? Is he still on that team?
Oh my God, maybe.
I don't even know.
Maybe he could be part of a potential trade. Interesting though that you went with an NFC team, Jeff.
Yeah,
and
Jeff
I mean,
likes to flip flop.
It's true.
Well, no. I mean, I think if there's one NFC team that will get in the mix, it'll be the Eagles, because I did say yesterday, San Francisco obviously going to prefer them to be traded out of conference. I still say that's true, but I just, we're talking ideal landing spots. Which teams I think should be looking. I think the Eagles should be looking hard at this.
Well, they would suddenly have multiple threats in the passing game too, as Jalen Hurts continues to develop. Speaking of developing here, we know that people are still thinking that maybe Daniel Jones needs to develop a little more. We just heard Julian give his draft needs for teams in the NFC East. Giants pick 5th. Julian says they need some help in the O-line and at corner. On the DraftKings Sportsbook, all the team draft specials are up. Giants are minus 120 to take an offensive lineman. Is that the bet, Pierce?
Yeah, that's always the bet. I'm always for drafting an offensive lineman, although they did just draft an offensive lineman in 2020. Didn't work out very well for them. But then again, what Giants draft pick really is working out? Kadarius Toney, that didn't really work out very well. Daniel Jones, that didn't really work out very well. I'd argue that Saquon Barkley hasn't really worked out very well either. And I'm sure people say, oh, well, they got injured. Well, they got injured. I don't know what to tell you. Those draft picks are not working out. But maybe if they add another offensive lineman, maybe that'll improve Barkley. Maybe that'll improve Jones. Maybe that'll improve Kadarius Toney. And one last thing about these players waking up and deciding they want to be traded. This is a terrible precedent that in the NFL now you can just wake up and all of a sudden say, I want to be traded. And then 2 hours later, you're on a new team. I don't think that's going to be a good thing moving forward.
How is it a terrible precedent? It's an amazing precedent for us. It's giving us work.
How long has the NFL been run by the owners? I mean, thank goodness there are players out there that are speaking out and saying, hey, we want out. They're the ones on the field. They're the ones getting hit. They're the ones putting their life on the line, literally. So when the owners are getting away with highway robbery for these players, speak up. I'm always going to side with the players. Get your money. Speak up.
I'm team owner.
Oh, my God. You would, because look at you. You dress like an owner every day on this show. Give me absolute chaos. Jeff, Pierce did mention like Daniel Jones hasn't worked out. So maybe you like a long shot here, plus 1,400 for the Giants to pick a quarterback as their first pick.
I just don't think. I mean, look, it's the Giants, so they if there's any team that's going to get roped in and maybe just do something crazy, the Giants are definitely up there. They have the 2 picks inside the top 10. Maybe they get enamored with Malik Willis or Desmond Ridder or something like that. I just don't think it's a deep enough draft class for the Giants to give up on Daniel Jones here. I mean, I think if there was enough talent here, it would be fine to do that. But I think the more likely scenario is the Giants, they go in and they just say, we're doing everything we can to protect Daniel Jones. And they take at least one O lineman there. And, Evan Neal, not O'Neal. I just added the O for my own personal benefit. Evan Neal is definitely going to be someone they have an eye on there if he drops. The Giants could also be a landing spot for Kayvon Thibodeau if he drops as well. I think edge is the other place, and rusher is the other place that the Giants will look to go on. I know the odds are big, but I'm not going to take that bet with the Giants looking at quarterback.
I mean, Reed, with them having the 7th pick as well, how tough of a bet is this because they have 2 selections so close to each other?
I don't think it's tough at all. I think, Pierce harkening back to the 1920s football offensive line, toe kicking field goals by quarterbacks with the upright stands in the middle of the touch, like the TV zone. I guess that's what we're going to, but he's right. I think you never are, especially in this draft, there's a handful of guys that can go in the top 10 that are solid prospects, right? Evan Neal, the tackle out of Alabama, being one of them. He's 6'7", 350, but moves like a svelte 300-pounder. That's a big difference, right? When you get 50 pounds, when you're that heavy. So, and he only allowed 1 pressure in the entire 2020 playoffs. And when you talk about someone like Daniel Jones, and one thing about Kadarius Toney, Pierce, it's only been 1 year. The guy was injured too. So you got to give these guys some leeway to see if they're going to work out. But granted, like these guys have said, it's the Giants. They have a history of not making things work out. That's what scares you. But I do think it's offensive line. They'd be silly to stretch on someone like Sauce Gardner. I think he's still going to be there the 7th round. I'll get to that in a little bit. Or excuse me, we've had pick.
They go 5 and 7. We've had Plaxico Burress on this show like multiple times. He's talked about he loves Toney, and if he could if he could stay healthy, which is obviously huge because he had a couple of those huge games early in the year.
Like one game with 270 yards receiving or something.
He could do that every week, Pierce, if he stayed healthy. Oh, by the way, Pierce. Yeah, that's true. Maybe use some help there. But Pierce, earlier in the show, I'm pretty sure you said that the Jaguars were one player away from the Super Bowl. That's why I love you so much, Pierce. That's when you gave us the AFC South draft needs. They've got the first pick, but let's move to the third pick. What's the position of player for the Texans' first selection here? Jeff, even money here for edge D lineman going to Houston.
Yeah, and I think, again, we're looking at this on the DraftKings Sportsbook. You're also getting plus 175 to take an O-lineman. I like that bet a little bit better. I think Houston is a team that could go they're very much like the Giants. They could go in multiple directions. Maybe not, but I think the Giants more heavily likely going to go O-lineman just because of where they are in the draft. But at 3, you look at Walker, Hutchinson, those are the unanimous kind of top 2 draft picks right now, especially in the betting odds. And then you've got 2 OTs right after them, O-lineman, excuse me. So, again, you just looking at that, there's a good likelihood that just like the top 2 edge rushers are going to be off the board. Maybe the Texans just say, okay, we're going to take a chance on Kayvon Thibodeau here. But I think that O-lineman at plus 175 with Neal, they're highly rated. I think that's a really good bet for the Houston Texans for the draft.
All right, Reed, you got defensive lineman edge plus 100, offensive lineman plus 175, defensive back plus 300.
That's where I'm going, Emerson. DB at plus 300. Look, it makes sense to what Jeff was saying. You could throw a dart at a board of team needs for Houston, and that would be a solid pick for them at number 3. They have a ton. Like Sands, maybe Davis Mills, who they really like, and they're going to build around him. But, you could probably upgrade from him as well. But I'm going with DB. And you talk about, Sauce Gardner, if he's probably not going to go that high. Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame, he's one that he didn't really rate out very nicely at the combine, so his numbers aren't great, but his on tape stuff is fantastic. And when you take a look at him or someone like Derek Stingley out of LSU, who had a great freshman year, but he got hurt his last couple of years. Those 2 guys are, they're stretches, I think, in a little sense of it. But when you talk about Houston, they need that position at safety and DB. So I look on defensive back at plus 300.
All right, Pierce, I know you're an expert now at the AFC South. Running back plus 10,000, tight end plus 10,000, kicker, punter, long snapper plus 20,000.
There we go.
Yeah, no, I wish.
Come on.
No, they probably need those positions as well. I love how Jeff says they could go in multiple directions with a positive spin. Well, that means they have so many needs everywhere. That's why they can go in every single direction. And when you have that many needs, as I mentioned in the video, I think their best move is to trade this number 3 pick and try to get multiple picks out of it because they have so many holes, and that would leave them picking 13th. And then with 13th, they still could get an edge rusher, but I like Jeff's call going with an offensive lineman. I think Charles Cross could be available right there. Bang for your buck, 13th pick. I think offensive line is where they'll go. Now, again, that requires them to trade that pick away, but I think it's definitely a live possibility.
Well, Pierce, we're going to have our mock draft next week, but a lot of players draft position, like over-unders. They're up on the DK Sportsbook as well. Any player you're looking at here where you see some value?
Kenny Pickett over 12.5. I've got the feeling that there will be an outbreak of rationality, and these teams will come to their senses and realize that they don't need to overspend on quarterback. And all these teams picking near the top of the draft either don't need a quarterback or they've got more pressing needs and they should take the best pick available. And I can see Pickett sliding to the back half of the first round.
Okay, Reed, it looked like you were nodding there in agreement.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit. And you got to divorce the pre-draft hype from what teams actually are going to do, what they need. They're not going to say what they want, right? Aside from the Jacksonville Jaguars, they always tell you 14 hours before they're going to draft who they're going to draft.
No,
but my guys on the Garner. Yeah, they are a mess. Sauce, I think over 5.5. I think it's at minus 105 last time I checked. Everyone has this guy in their 4th or 5th. I think he's going 7th or even sliding a little bit later than that. Right. There are a few things that could make him go high. So if Stingley goes 3rd overall, you might see a run, right? These guys like the Giants, instead of waiting for 7, they take him at 4, which I think would be silly. And if Bradbury stays on that team and he doesn't get traded in the next handful of days, then you're going to start to see these guys trying to manipulate the cap space and maybe not be able to pay someone like a Gardner. So I do think over 5.5 of Gardner is a safe bet.
All right, Jeff, I know producer Drew put in a note here about Jameson Williams. It certainly has the talent to go in the top 10. Had that injury Might scare some teams off him. Plus 125 to go 15th or later there. And some people have said, oh, could he be the heir apparent to Tyreek Hill in Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's a good fade candidate as well. I'd go under that just from the simple fact of, like, teams don't need to take the risk. It's just such a deep wide receiver class. So I actually like the under on Williams. And I'm going to throw this prop out. This line has moved a lot. We're talking about Kenny Pickett. Desmond Ridder, I believe about a week and a half ago, was around plus 2,400 to be the first the second quarterback selected. Now he's sitting at, the first quarterback selected. Now he's at plus 1,000. He was plus 2,500 a week and a half ago. So I still like Desmond Ridder. His odds have been cut in half, but at plus 1,000, he's the most pro-ready quarterback, in my opinion, in the draft. And I think teams are going to look at that. And if nobody moves up to take Malik Willis, I think Ridder's got a chance to kind of sneak in and be the first quarterback taken. So I don't really want to fade Willis either, but getting on Ridder to go over Pickett and Willis at plus 1,000, I still think there's a pretty decent value there.
All right, cool. Good stuff. Well done, everybody. We learned a little something extra about you today, Pierce. You're an owner's guy, which doesn't surprise me at all.
We'd be lucky to have Pierce on the show.
Has Debo been traded yet?
No, not yet. Yeah, if we're basing off what happened with Tyreek Hill, it'll probably be before 1:00. So appreciate that. It's the curse of Pierce teacher gets alive and well. We'll have you back tomorrow, man, to talk some NASCAR. Appreciate you guys. Right after this final break of the show, we got our final block of the show. Nick Fryer and RotoWire's Eric Halterman talking some baseball picks. All right, we have an interesting slate coming up today with like baseball, a bunch of day games, night games. So we're going to try to split this all up, make it really easy for everyone to follow here. Our DraftKings contributor, Nick Fryer, RotoWire's Eric Halterman. Good to see you guys here for our little fun segment, MLB batting practice. So best DFS and sportsbook plays for Major League Baseball. A lot of afternoon games, as I mentioned. So quickly here, before the games start, give us a bet you like in one of the 1:00 Eastern games here, Nick.
Yeah, Francisco Lindor is going up against Anthony DeSclafani, and of course, Lindor's had a strong start this season. He's also done really well, particularly against right-handed pitching. 1042 OPS against righties, 4 doubles, 1 home run. Fits right in perfectly for over 1.5 total bases today against a guy that he's done well against throughout his career. Only 12 career bats against him, but 5 hits, a double, and 2 home runs against DeSclafani. So I think he's no problem getting at least 2 bases in this one today.
Easy E, what about you, man?
Yeah, I like the Blue Jays over the Red Sox today. It looks like the rest of the world made 2 as the lines just moved from -110 to -120. But I think the Jays have a slightly better lineup. I think they should end up as one of the best lineups in the league, whereas the Red Sox are a good lineup, but maybe not quite in that tier. And I think they have the advantage on the pitching side as well. Kevin Gausman has a mediocre 4.22 ERA through 2 starts, but I wouldn't put really any stock in that number just yet. What I would look at is his 14 strikeouts against 0 walks. And on the other side, Tanner Houck does have a 3.00 ERA, which looks better, but 7 strikeouts against just 6 walks for him. Not the most inspiring start. I do like him a lot in the long term, but I'd like to see 1 or 2 strong outings before I consider him on Gausman's level. So I think -120 is perfectly fine price for Toronto here.
And Eric, a couple different slates today, games all day. Who's the absolute one guy you need to have in your DFS lineup?
I think it's Seiya Suzuki at 5,500 on the late slate. Normally, I try to go for cheaper names here, but if you look at the lineups in that late slate, it's an uninspiring group. The Mariners might be the best, and the Mariners at home are not that exciting. Then you've got the Rangers, the Cubs, Pirates, Marlins, Cardinals. There's not a lot of star power on offense there. And I think Suzuki really actually might be a star. He couldn't look any more real so far through 12 games, hitting .387 with 4 homers. Leads the league in walk rate with 28.3%, and he leads the league in barrel rate, 28.6%. There's really nothing more he could have done so far to make him look real. And he's facing Bryce Wilson, who's got a career ERA over 5.5 and hasn't shown anything this year to suggest that's about to change. So I think he's a true star power kind of guy, just like your dog over there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, when he is like, I can't believe there is Mariners slander on this show. It's a good thing Steve Buchanan's not here, Fryer.
It's going to get ugly a little bit later too, but actually right now, what my favorite guy tonight, looking at a value play, Charlie Culperson, obviously got to make sure he's in the lineup tonight, but he has been hitting against lefties whenever they've been facing him. Of course, this one is on the later slate. Limited opportunities so far this season, but 4 for 9 with a double to start against left-handed pitching. He's hit left-handed pitching well for the majority of his career. Against Marco Gonzalez, who's starting for the Mariners tonight, 6 for 11 with a triple and a home run. And of course, he gives you a little bit of flexibility, third base and shortstop. And at 2.7K, I think this is a value play if he's playing tonight that you have to roll with. If you're looking for something a little bit more expensive, Daniel Vogelbach, I know Eric was talking about that Cubs game. I like the Pirate side of it going up against Mark Leiter. And I think that's a lineup you should be stacking, and Vogelbach is the piece that I like most in that one.
Fryer, what about your favorite player prop on the DK Sportsbook for games tonight? Let's go over there.
I'm really upset that Steve's actually not on today. No disrespect. I love doing stuff with Eric, but this is a great day for me to go at the Mariners. Marco Gonzalez, his over-under on his outs recorded today is at 17.5. I know he bounced back last time out, but that was against an Astros lineup that has struggled against left-handed pitching early. The Rangers, on the other hand, are smoking left-handed pitching. Third highest OPS, third highest ISO, and the third highest WOBA against left-handed pitching. And they also have the lowest K rate against left-handed pitching. If you want another hitter prop, though, Eric's guy, Juan Soto, over 1.5 total bases going up against Zach Davies. Soto has smashed right-handed pitching. Of course, that's in the 4 p.m. game. But Gonzalez is my favorite one when you look at those later ones.
Yeah, Nick, you don't take the verbal abuse when even keel Eric Halterman is on the show. That's it, man.
Absolutely.
Eric, what's up, dude?
Happy to be considered a much nicer guy than Steve. Happy to be considered the one guy in the industry who knows that Juan Soto is good, apparently. If I have to have a guy, I'll take him. But anyway, as for these player props tonight, I'd throw some home run darts at that Pirates-Cubs game. Both pitchers extremely shaky here. Bryce Wilson, talked about him already, career 5.5 ERA, doesn't strike out anybody, doesn't really do anything else notable either. Mark Leiter on the other side, 5.53 ERA in 114 innings from 2017 to 18, then missed 2 years with Tommy John surgery, spent all of last year in the minors, returns to give up 7 runs in 3 1/3 at Coors Field last week. No reason to believe either of these pitchers could shut anybody down. So Seiya Suzuki, I think at plus 600 is far too underrated there. But even on the Pirates side, Brian Reynolds plus 425, Yoshi Tsutsugo at plus 500, even Daniel Vogelbach at plus 550. I think there could be some balls flying unless we suddenly get some wind blowing in at Wrigley. So you'll definitely want to check that before placing any of those bets.
All right, we got less than 3 minutes to go in the show here, Fryer. Which game, talking from 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on, do you like the run total to bet on?
So if we're talking, I'm going to go with the team total here. Shocker. I like the Rangers over 3.5 runs against the Mariners. Of course, they've had 2 in these first 2 games, but I talked a lot about why I liked the Rangers going up against Marco Gonzalez tonight. They have smashed left-handed pitching. You could also do Rangers over 1.5 in the first 5 innings as well. I think it's a reasonable bet. Just keep that exposure to Marco Gonzalez. But one of my favorite ones tonight, to me, my favorite bet overall is Pirates over 1.5 in the first 5 innings going up against Mark Leiter. I know the Pirates bats felt quiet against the Brewers. That's going to happen. But in 4 of the 5 games before they played Milwaukee, they had 2+ runs in the first 5 innings in 4 of those games, and 3 of those games came against right-handed pitching.
Right. So you just gave your Slated Brew pick there as well, your favorite bet overall?
Well, I know we're tight on time.
That's okay. Wow. You know what? We have a producer to produce the show. Okay. And I'm the guy who asks questions. All right. Don't let it happen again.
Wow. Okay. Now you're delaying it further too. So
I truly am. But but now Eric has a fat 90 seconds to give me like which
You're
game
welcome.
from 3:30 on you like the run total to bet on, and go ahead, sneak in your slate approved pick at the same time.
Yeah, well, thankfully I can be pretty fast on that first one. Talked plenty about this Pirates Cubs game already. Just take the over 9 runs there. It is a battle of stoppable forces versus movable objects here. The lineups aren't great, but I think the pitching is even worse. I don't think I need to add much beyond what I've already said there. I don't think it should be too hard for this game to end up 6-4, 7-3, something like that. As far as my favorite bet overall for the night games, I like Marlins minus 140 over the Cardinals. The offenses, I think, are probably pretty similar. The Cardinals have been hot, but I don't think they're anything special. 6 by WRC plus so far, but they're 15th last year. That's about where the Marlins are so far this season. And they're backed by Pablo Lopez, who had a very strong start to the season, just 1 run over his first 2 starts and was very promising last year. Jordan Hicks on the other side, curious to see what he can do, but he's not going to do it for very long. I think he's going to be capped at about 45 pitches. So I'll take Pablo Lopez against what could be effectively a bullpen game on the other side.
I love it. You guys were excellent today. And I'll be sure to text Buchanan here after the show. Let him know that you both hate the Mariners a lot.
Good.
Works
All right.
for me.
All right. We'll see everyone back here again tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock. I believe we'll be in studio for that. So no cameos here from my dogs tomorrow. And then at the we got the slate. We got a Thursday edition of the slate. I'll be holding it down the host chair with Reed Fowler, and Jeff Ulrich has promised to show up for the last 10 minutes of the show. So that should be very, very exciting. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back here on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter at 5 o'clock.